for joining us. We are here for our daily learning, 12 o'clock to 12:20 in the book of Mishlei, the book of Proverbs. Today we have a very special guest alongside me. So if you hear the guest here and there, you'll know what it's from. She is very active today. We are going to start from chapter 18, verse 13. Chapter 18, verse 13. And King Solomon teaches here an extremely valuable lesson. Verse 13, Meshiv davar b'terem yishma. If someone gives an answer before they even hear the question, sometimes you see that people give an answer before they even hear the question. Meshiv davar b'terem yishma. If someone answers an answer before they hear the question, sometimes people think it's a smart thing. It makes you sound smart. You're answering even before you know the question. But King Solomon says, no. If you answer something before you even hear the question, not only is that not a sign or a show of wisdom, but ivelet hilo uklima. It's actually a foolish and silly thing, because who said you know for sure what the other person is going to ask? And even if you know what they're going to ask, you don't necessarily want to show, like be arrogant and say, oh, I know everything. So, Meshiv davar b'terem yishma. If someone answers a question before they even hear it, if you give the answer, if you cut the person off and give an answer before you even hear the question, ivelet hilo uklima. It is an embarrassment. And it is a disgrace. I'll say I myself am often tempted to this. You hear someone asking a question and you think, oh, I know for sure what the person is going to ask. I know what they're going to say. And there's this temptation to just go on with an answer. King Solomon says, no, make sure you give them a full chance. Make sure you let them hear the entirety of, let them express the entirety of the question. The next point cannot be overemphasized. If someone is, chapter 18, or in chapter 18, verse 14, a person's spirit is going to nourish their sickness. Meaning, now we know this to be true on a very physical level. If you have a good spirit, if you're in a good mood, even if you're confronting a very big challenge, you will be able to overcome. But a sad and oppressed, downtrodden spirit, who's going to sustain that? If someone is depressed, that actually weakens their immune system and makes them less capable to respond. There's this story I heard. I was very moved from someone who was in Sloan Kettering Memorial Hospital, hospital for cancer. And this young man was in the hospital. He was with cancer. And against many odds, he survived. And so it was a Hasidic family. They had this meal, a Thanksgiving meal, to thank God for him getting better. The doctor came to the meal and he says, how did you make it through? It was so difficult. And he says, I want you to know, doctor, one night I heard you speak. And I heard you say behind the curtain to the other doctor, this guy is a fighter. This guy is going to get through this. He's a fighter. And I said, wow, I am a fighter. And that gave me the strength. So King Solomon says, a person's spirit is going to sustain his sickness and make him come out triumphant. And a downtrodden spirit, a broken spirit, who can carry it? So that is verse 14. Next is Lev Navon Yiknedat. If you have a wise heart, you will pursue wisdom. And the ear of the wise is going to ask for wisdom. Bottom line is, something King Solomon has said many times, is that wisdom attracts wisdom. If you're smart, you'll want to get smarter. And so if someone is very wise, they will try to get more wisdom. Next is verse 16. Matan Adam Yarchiv Lo. If someone gives, if someone is charitable, if someone does acts of kindness, that is something that is going to pay back. It's going to give him back, and he's going to be richer by giving. Doesn't necessarily mean he'll expand his wealth, but the money that you give, that is the real money that you have. And it is going to guide you in front of great people. I cannot say how many times I've seen people who are very wealthy and they're hardly noteworthy. They're hardly, people don't know about them. And even if people know about them, it's like, it doesn't make a big difference. Why? Because they're not philanthropists. They're not charitable. They're not giving. And so they have all the wealth in the world, but what good does it do anyone? But sometimes you have someone who has half that wealth, and they are charitable, and they are philanthropic, and they give, and they're kind, and they're gracious, and that in and of itself is something that gives them recognition, meaning, etc. Next, tzaddik harishon berivo uva re'eu v'chakaro. So important. Sometimes people get into a fight, and they immediately think they are the righteous ones. Often the first to jump into a fight thinks that they are the most righteous. And so the first guy that goes into the fight thinks, wow, I must be correct. I must be the one that's right. But then his friend comes and corrects him. So often people jump into a fight thinking that they are correct, and then their friend comes and proves that they are not the one that is correct. Next, verse 18, Midyanim yashbit hagoral uven atzumim yafrid. A fight will often be called off by fate. Often people fight over something. They fight. What's going to be the weather tomorrow? They fight. The next day the weather comes. Often fights are unnecessary because they will just be decided. They will be resolved by the fate. They will be decided by the consequential reality. And so they're just not worth it so many times. If something's going to be resolved, why? If you have a fight, if the train's going to come in a minute or 2 minutes and you're there's no point. The train is going to come and it's gonna be resolved. So that is verse 18. Next is verse 19. This is a very hard verse to translate. What it means is sometimes someone is, there are two people in a fight, and one of them thinks he's the stronger one. And the example Rashi gives is Lot. Lot separates from Abraham. He goes to the city of Sodom. And you would think that Lot won because he's the one that ended up in the more powerful. Lot is the one that ended up in the more successful position. He ended up with the people of Sodom, the wealthy, the powerful, the prosperous. But really, he's the one that lost. So, sometimes you have a brother who gets into a fight and he goes to the stronger place. And the fight between them is going to separate them like the lock of a palace. You ever see the old movies of the huge British fortresses where you have these, or anywhere in Europe in the Middle Ages, you have these huge doors and these locks. To lock one of those doors, wow, that's like, they have these huge things, the metal lock that closes the door. And it completely locks the door. Solomon says that is what a fight can do to a relationship. Sometimes you have a fight with someone, the lock on that relationship can be as big as the lock of a palace. So make sure always keep the peace, always pursue peace, because when you get into a fight, then that can be like the lock of a palace and cause everlasting conflict. Next is a beautiful pasuk. A man is satiated from his is the words of his mouth. Often you eat what you say. Meaning, you say good things to people, you'll get they'll want you to come to them, they'll want you to work for them. Your words are actually not only determining things in the world of words, but they actually determine your ability to sustain yourself, to eat. Literally, you will eat the produce of your mouth. So always be careful, not only about what you say, but how you say, because what and how you say are things that will directly impact your ability to live. And then he goes on to the next verse, which is an incredibly powerful analogy. Mavet v'chaim b'yad halashon. The death and life are in the hands of the tongue. This is just a phenomenal pasuk. Mavet v'chaim b'yad halashon. There is death and life. And there's a famous saying from World War II. They used to say when the Allied ships would go, they would take different paths to confuse the enemy. But there were German submarines. The German submarines would attempt to sink the Allied ships. And they would try and get information on when the ships go and when they come. And everyone that was in the Navy used to be told, loose lips sink ships. Meaning, if you say something that is giving away information, that can be picked up by the enemy. And so it's so important to know, Mavet v'chaim b'yad halashon. Death and life are at the hands of the tongue. And yeah, that's something that is going to help you and save you. The ohavea yochal kirya, and those who love it, those who love life are going to eat the fruit of the tongue. So there's really nothing more powerful than the power of language, than the power of speech, whether you're talking or you're writing. The point is, language is what motivates people. It's what can moralize and demoralize people. Language is what can create life and death, literally. So it's so important to know that the most powerful thing we have at our disposal is language, and we must act accordingly. Meaning, if you are going to say something, recognize you can create life, but also recognize you can create death. So make sure you use your language responsibly and that you are using it in a way that creates life rather than death. And this verse cannot be overstated, obviously. Mavet v'chaim b'yad halashon. Literally, life and death is in the hands of your mouth. You can literally create life. You can literally create death. It's all in control of your mouth. Verse 22, Matzah isha matzah tov. If someone finds a wife, that's the way to find good, and he will have God's grace. And there are so many verses that are learned from this. And these are words that are said at Jewish weddings, at every Jewish weddings, Matzah isha matzah tov. If someone finds a wife, they have found good, and that will give them the grace of God. In fact, there's a Jewish tradition that a person getting married the day of their wedding is like Yom Kippur for them, meaning that person has all their sins forgiven on the day of their wedding. All your sins are atoned for on the day of your wedding. That is the Jewish tradition, and it comes from this idea of Matzah isha matzah tov. If someone finds a wife, they have found something good, and it elicits God's good grace and good response. The next verse is Tachanunim yedaber rash. The poor person speaks very humbly. They beg. They say, "Can I please, sir?" And they're just very humble when they speak because they recognize their poverty and difficulty of circumstances. But the rich person, they speak very harshly often. They speak very harshly. They want to get their way. They know they can get their way. Always try and find a friend. Find a friend to hang out with. Why? Because you will eventually find a friend
that is going to be closer than a brother. You will find a friend that is going to be closer than a brother. Some friends are even closer than a brother. So that is Mishlei. We are up to chapter 19. We are here every single day at 12 o'clock for a 15-20-minute learning. I really very much appreciate everyone that's here. Feel free to leave comments, thoughts in the feedback. I really cannot thank everyone enough. Wishing you a very happy day, a restful day, a safe day, a healthy day, a warm day in this weather. And Be'ezrat Hashem, I will see you all tomorrow. Have a very good